Good morning. Captain Madhead retired here with another one of my reading between the lines segments from observation posts. That's a series of groups that I set up on Facebook in order to try to get the system to be changed. And a thought just crossed my mind that I didn't explain, how I came to be doing all this stuff. I've always had this interest in the military, going back to childhood, so I thought I'd join the military when I got out of high school, but I had psoriasis, so I thought I wouldn't get in, so I didn't join up as a Rig Force person. So when I was working for Canada Revenue Agency later, I met a naval reservist by the name of Keith, trying to remember his last name, Reese. And he told me that it shouldn't be a problem, so I went up and applied, and I got approved under a thing called the Direct Entry Officer Program, because I had a university degree. So then I entered the military as a logistics officer. I looked at it and I thought, well, I'm having some trouble with CRA. They're treating me like crap, so maybe I'll try to find something that if I get out of CRA, I'll go and find something in the military that might apply to me. So I thought, well, the offshore oil is there, so maybe I'll try to be a logistics officer. So I joined the military as a logistics officer with 36th Newfoundland Service Battalion in 1999. Then I went and did some courses called Basic Army Officer Training and Basic Officer Candidate, BOT1, Basic Officer Training 1 and 2, and Basic Officer Training. That's the 3 courses I had to do in order to get get commissioned as an officer. Then I served as a first they threw me as the assistant kit shop officer, and taking care of the library and stuff, because I had no training. I couldn't lead troops. So until I got some training, that was the way it was. Anyway, so I served 12 years, and then I got out 13, maybe 1999, 2012. I was released medically. I was a Class A reservist. Now, today's episode, that's a little bit about me, how I came to be doing all this stuff. Plus, a lot of the stuff I'm working on is about taxes. Yesterday's Facebook Live broadcast was about taxes. And because I was a payroll tax collector for 16 years with Canada Revenue Agency, I think I can speak with authority about what they're doing wrong. And this morning I went and found the YouTube video where I spoke up at the town hall dog and pony shows that the government was doing. It is my not so humble opinion that these dog and pony shows were a waste of money. They could just as easily, if they wanted to do things, send out a mass mailing and saved a lot of money, instead of them going around and seeing the country and getting the taxpayer to pay for it. They should have just changed the system if they wanted to and just let us know by mail. That's my opinion. Now, the thing is I asked the minister and the deputy minister about the taxation of the veteran. When, tort law system, if you get hit by a car, you get paid damages, you don't have to pay taxes. If you get injured on the job as a civilian, you're not supposed to pay taxes as a civilian, get workers' compensation. And under the Pension Act, you weren't supposed to get taxed for the various, injuries you had suffered in the military. Now, I spoke to that at length yesterday, so I'm not going to talk about it, but as an introduction to today's topic, because this is what I call my read between the lines segment. The way I have it done up in my head, and I don't know how long I can continue doing this because of what happened yesterday. What happened yesterday is after I did that segment, and then later a thought struck me that shook me to the core of my being. Okay? I thought to myself, the Canadian Forces Superannuation Act Section 15.2b takes into account the Canada Pension Plan Disability and reduces the amount of the money that is paid to save. And the thing is, the Chief of Defense Staff, as the head of the military, delegates down the power, and the soldier's ordered to go to war. If the soldier goes to war healthy and then comes back disabled and then is ordered to get the Canada Pension Plan Disability by the Army, again through the National Defensive Service Income Support Insurance Plan, then basically the soldier's savings are being used against them, because the contributions for the Canada Pension Plan are contributions, as I said yesterday, and they're supposed to be your savings for the future. So now, if this was some other person doing it to the soldiers, that I could understand, but the Canadian Forces Superannuation Act is a retirement pension, a registered pension plan under the Income Tax Act, Regulation Section 8500. And it is meant to be the nest egg, the retirement funds that is put away for the veteran. Now, if you take away the Canada Pension Plan causes a reduction in the Canadian Forces Superannuation Act because of Section 15.2b, then the Army, the military that sent the soldier to war, is profiting. by reducing the Soldiers Canadian Forces Superannuation Act pension. Now that shook me to the core, because that's so biased. That's like black marketeering. That's like treasonous in my mind. Listen, if this was some civilian agency doing it, I could understand. So I was so upset, I called the Chief of Defense Staff's office. I explained to the Chief of Defense Staff's officer there, Lieutenant Colonel Jolie, I believe, and then I explained to him how this is like downright despicable. It might be legal under the Canadian Forces Superannuation Act, but it is irregular, immoral, unethical. It is so dishonest that I think the public would understand that you cannot do this to the people that serve you. Right? That, to me, is why I do all this. Now, then I called the Canadian Forces Superannuation Act people, and I got into my case a little bit, but only after I explained all this to the agent. I asked her how long she worked there. Only 2 years. So I explained to her the way pensions work and how you can't subsidize one pension with the other pension. But more importantly, did she see the point that if you, as a nation, send a soldier to war healthy and he comes back disabled, then you can't take his Canada Pension Plan disability into account and reduce your legal liability to pay under the Canadian Forces Superannuation Act. So it might be legal that it's in the Act until somebody points out to her that, like I said, it's unconstitutional under Section 9213 of the Constitution Act, because pensions are provincial. So the federal government might want to save money, but it's not the provincial government's. So it can't. It can't take into account the Canada Pension Plan. So all that's legalese, and that's helped me keep sane, looking at the technical legalities. But if you think about it, that they're saving on our disabled backs, this is going to come to a head one of these days. Now, I talked about that, some of that, and I did this after the fact, so I'm making this update here. But something has to give. You cannot do this. If they were doing this to civilians who just, that would be one thing. It's bad, but it's not as bad as someone who takes away money from a person they created as a disabled veteran. Now, let me try to get into my other topic before I, break down or get wore out or something. My throat gets a little tired here, dried out talking. Speaking of that, let me get a drop of Diet Pepsi here. So what I decided, I do these read between the lines segments. I looked at the Auditor General's treatment of the 2012 file report one time, and I was going to do the 2006 file report that the Auditor General did today. But I had this idea to look at the 8th Senate Committee on National Defense report, because it has some truth in it, and I'm going to read off a part of it. It's in my Facebook group under the files, and I made a comment to it. What I do sometimes on older posts is I make a comment to it, and then that brings it up to the top. So I mentioned that I might use it in today's broadcast to bring it up to the top, so you can download it and have a look at it. Now, at the very beginning, in the introduction, and I'll read this off. It might sound a bit stilted, but I used to be a teacher or whatever. The Canadian Forces have not always treated injured soldiers with either compassion or understanding. Now, reading between the lines, that means they fucked up, okay? You can't say that openly, so they put it in beating around the bush terms, okay? So, they have not always treated injured soldiers with compassion and understanding. No fucking kidding, okay? They try to take things into account and not pay you. For example, the what I just talked about in the bridging. Like the Service Income Support Insurance Plan taking the Pension Act into account. Like the Service Income Support Insurance Plan taking the Canada Pension Plan into account. Like the Service Income Support Insurance Plan taking the anything into account, because it takes whatever it can into account, so it won't have to pay. So, reading between the lines, they stated it because of the government report. They couldn't say that out loud, but I'm reading between the lines. Now, a number of internal studies of the release system over the past 3 years have concluded that the injured and sick soldiers have often been left alone to deal with a complex bureaucratic system that can deny the disability benefits and programs that are their due and proper recognition for their service. Now, that sounds great, but you know something? They designed that system. They designed all these systems. They made these complex and bureaucratic systems. So don't go telling us that the system you have created is full of red tape when you could have designed a simple system which you could have left with very little red tape. So, again, crocodile tears, in my opinion. Right? The system has been found to make little allowance for the fact that soldiers injured seriously enough to be released are often too ill or psychologically vulnerable to defend, much less promote, their own interests. Now, reading between the lines again, they're saying that there's no union there to protect the injured soldier. In a civilian job, you have a shop steward, you have a union, and they are supposed to protect your legal interests. If you become a disabled veteran in Canada's service, you don't have anybody there to act as like a representative. The Office of the Veterans Ombudsman, they're useless. They have 30 employees, $5 million budget at each of the Canadian Forces and the Veterans Affairs Ombudsmans. They don't do anything except cover their arse. I don't have to say anything about that. I can refer to, again, I could haul it up here later, the 2016 Canadian Forces Canadian Forces Ombudsman scathing report by the Auditor General of Canada. They said they had no training about how to investigate things. They said they had internal disputes which caused people to leave, and there was a lack of knowledge at the organization. Take the time to read that. I might do it as one of my read between the lines segments later, but the Ombudsman is a toothless organization. They can do reports, like a 2007 report on reserved care, they called it, about the way that Reserve Force members, the Canadian Forces Ombudsman did this, not the Veterans Ombudsman, and they did a report about how, the reservists can't get medical care, unlike a regular force person. Now that caused me, not pat myself on the back, but I started to look stuff up, and I saw that the Canada Health Act Section 2 said that Canadian Forces members are not covered under provincial Medicare. Now that was quite the shock, because as a reservist I was going to the doctor, and it was being billed to the province. Now what should have been happening is that as a Canadian Forces member, they should have followed the law. The law said I wasn't a part of the Medicare system, so you just do what it says. Now, again, I could go into that and do a whole episode, because I dug into that, and I found that the province was screwing the feds and the feds were screwing the province. If you went in as a provincial citizen and got a service, the doctor would get X number of dollars. If the government of Newfoundland was billing the federal government for a soldier who was out on exercise and got injured, and then they had to go to an emergency and the care delivery unit wasn't open, the province was probably charging them 3 times what they were charging the provincial resident with the same condition. Now, I view that as outright fraud. Why should they charge more? Right? We're all in one country. Why should the province charge the feds more? They have this game where they seem to want to charge each other. It costs money, and they seem to want to spread the costs and make it all confusing. As I explained to the Canadian Forces superannuation agent yesterday, I said there was a case in, I can't remember the year, Peel, Supreme Court of Canada, and the federal government cut a program called the Canada Assistance Program, which was a chunk of money that the feds would throw at the provinces for welfare, social services. Now, in the 1990s, I think it was 1997 or 1998, the federal government was on cutback mode, and it decided to cut back on the Canada Assistance Program because it had a federal power to change it. But obviously it was going to have trickle-down effects. So there was a reform school in Peel region up in Ontario, and they were stuck with the bill. So they sued the federal and the provincial governments to get the cost back. The Supreme Court of Canada said there would be no benefit to the taxpayer when they're all the same. The person who's a taxpayer in the municipality is also a taxpayer in the province, who is also a taxpayer in the federal government. If they gave a win to the municipality and made the feds or the province pay, that wouldn't make a difference. Now, I kind of view that very cynically, but I kind of agree with it in some respect, if not most respects. But what's happening here with, say, clawbacks and stuff, which is a form of taxation, as I said before, the people that are doing all the clawbacks are inappropriately thinking they can do it when they don't have the power to tax, first of all. And secondly, they're all taking into account things as income when they're property. Now, if you want to attack something based on the fact that you think that a person has too much money, that they have too much income, then you have to make sure that they have income in the first place. So if you get a Canadian Force to be income, because they get it each month, they get a certain payment, but it is the contributions that was made during your career was put into the bank, And then, when you retire, it gets sent back to you piece by piece until you die. That's the nature of pensions. Pensions are a capital or property in law, and you get some of that until you die, and then your spouse dies if it's a joint and several pension. You can have pensions that don't give any spouses anything. You can have some pensions that give 100% of what the person was getting after the pensioner dies. So the government has it all. They want it all kept simple. We can't afford to have a joint and several pension for people because it'd be too expensive. But excuse me, but pensions are supposed to be something that you attract and retain people with. That's one of the benefits that an employer is supposed to have, is that they try to get good and competent people to serve them long term, because they put vesting there so that you can't just work there, get a bit of a pension, and then leave. So it's supposed to save the government money. It's supposed to give them the opportunity to get good people and then retain them people. But they're all looking at it as an expense these days. For example, the government took the surplus on the Canadian Forces, the RCMP, and the Public Service Pension, the actuarial surplus. Now let me explain that a bit. I might drift off into various territories and not stay on topic all the time, but I'm going to try to explain something about actuarial surplus and actuarial deficit. Crystal ball gazing, that's what it is, okay? You have a person who's an actuary who makes certain assumptions about the future, and then they give it their best guess. That's what they did. Now, if you have an actuarial surplus, like the federal government did when times were good, then they took the money and used it as if it's an actual surplus, which is not the way it's supposed to work. The way it's supposed to work, and I know this from reading Supreme Court of Canada decisions, is that when you wind up a plan, so if you have a pension plan and then you stop it, it ends because the employer went out of business or something, the pension got wound up. Then if you have an actuarial surplus, then you have to decide on what to do with it. But you don't touch it when the pension is in operation. You have a surplus now. Next year, 5 years later, you might have a deficit. So you leave the surplus alone. You don't meddle with it. The federal government looked at it as an opportunity to pay down their debt, which is fucking atrocious, to pardon the French. Now, another thing that I mentioned after I put in my observation post group yesterday is that they de-linked, according to reports in Bill C-78 in the year 2000. You see, in 1991, the Auditor General of Canada did a report on the way the federal public pensions work, the Canadian Forces, the RCMP, and the Canadian Forces Superannuation Acts. I've read reports in the past that said they looked at combining all three pensions, but they were too dissimilar. They have similarities, but they're different. Okay, the members of the Public Service Superannuation Act are not the same members of the Canadian Forces pension and the RCMP pension. The contribution rates might be similar, but there are various small differences along the way. But they examined this in the past and they decided they couldn't make one big act that covered all of them. I don't know if I believe that, but they said they couldn't. Now, what they are doing, though, is they're trying to treat everybody as if you're getting money from the government, that it's their money, when it is actually our money, because the government doesn't do things and give people money. It doesn't provide a pension, like they always say. The nature of pensions is that they take your service, they should service, but they do service plus contribution in the military and the RCMP and public service. So they basically are saying, and I know this from a 1944 Supreme Court of Canada case called Richardson, they're saying that our service is not valuable enough, that we're getting paid too much. So they're requesting, they brought in a law to make us pay for our own pensions. There's no government money in our pensions. It comes from our service. So they deduct money, they put it into the bank, but that's why I was talking about the 1991 report. In the 1991 report, they said the liability under the public service pensions, and all of them lumped together, is basically a paper promise. They don't take the money off your check. So say you serve, like there's a veteran I'm trying to help right now, and he joined in 1977, got out in 2004. Let's use his case, Master Corporal Bloggins. So Master Corporal Bloggin served from 1977 to 2004. For most of his career, the last 4 years are the only time where they actually deducted money from his check and put it into a bank account. For the entire time prior to that, they merely noted on a piece of paper, probably an account, a ledger, computer or something, that they owed him X number of dollars. But they deducted real money from his check, right? So they violated pension law. Pension law says that if you deduct some money from someone, then you have to friggin' well do what you said. So you aren't supposed to say versus pension and then not send the money into some kind of investment bank account or whatever. You're breaching the fiduciary duty that's owed to the soldier then. Okay? You're not supposed to just get your money back that they took off when you retire. You're supposed to get back your defined benefit pension. So many years, and this bugs the hell out of me, many years the Office of the Superintendent of Financial Institutions puts in their actuarial report for the Canadian Forces and the Reserve Force Pension Plan. They put in there that for every dollar the government, the soldier puts in, we put in, say, $3.78. Excuse me? Who gives a shit? It's a defined benefit pension. I could put 1 cent in, I could put $1 million in, I'm going to get the pension based on the formula. So why is the OSFI feeding us this shit? Right? I think they want us to think we're getting a benefit. There's no benefit in getting your money back. Now, I did pensions and stuff yesterday. Let me look down through this 8th Senate Committee on National Defense Veterans Affairs report, and I'll give you the gist of it. A lot of it, what really caught my eye was what I searched Google for SISIP, the Service Income Support Insurance Plan, and I saw that Major Bruce Henwood, I actually had an argument with him because I'm a good investigator. I looked him up, called him up, and started to talk to him, tried to get some information, and he had, I'm sorry, I'll take my opinion over somebody else's opinion, especially when I've done all this research. But I was Googling the Service Income Support Insurance Plan, and they were looking into the problems with it back here. And part of his problem was, and at the very beginning, SISIP used to pay based on things like dismemberment. So it wasn't based on you getting medical released. It wasn't based on them adjudicating your file. Like Tom Anderson is a veteran I'm trying to help. Corporal Tom Anderson. Now, retired. He got blown up in Croatia, lost 2 legs, and he sent me all his documents. I have all his original documents. He photographed them, sent it to me by instant message. So I've used some of them, but I haven't used them all. But there's a document saying we're approving you for the SISIP accidental dismemberment clause. So somewhere along the way, they changed that. So now you get it based on the fact that it's X number of percent of your income and not the fact that you lost 2 legs or lost an arm or something. So somewhere along the line, they came to their senses that that's not the way long-term disability works. Now, speaking to that, I've spoken to this before, but the SISIP before 1999, I think people who lose their job and lose their employment, their service with the military, should not miss out on the insurance they're supposed to get, okay? So if you were released medically, it's not as easy to say for someone who released other than medical. But in 1999, they made the Service Income Support Insurance Plan automatic on medical release. Now, in my mind, if you make it automatic on medical release in 1999, then why wasn't it automatic prior to 1999? You can't tell me that's fair to release someone who paid their premiums into a long-term disability plan and then not give them their long-term disability insurance. Now, I'll mention an authoritarian source that agrees with me, and I'm pretty sure I came up with the idea on my own, but a 2007 Treasury Board Secretariat report on total compensation was talking about all the different benefits that the government pays people, and they said that before 1999 the government used the any occupation only, but they didn't use the own occupation like the other federal government long-term disability plans. This resulted in an unfair situation where a soldier could be medical released from their service because of their disability and then not get the insurance they paid for. Now, Treasury Board stated it openly in 2007 in an official report. Now, why haven't they gone back and fixed it? Money, right? It's going to cost a lot of money. What I came up with, a proposal to try to fix this, was everyone who was medically released prior to 1999 has to get at least 2 years worth of service income support insurance plan. The reason I say that is we don't know if you're totally disabled according to the policy. So for the first 2 years, you're guaranteed, you should be guaranteed, that 2 years of payment. Now after that, they probably have to use a proxy like they did in the Manouche case, and they'd have to say, do you have the Canada pension plan, do you have the exceptional incapacity allowance, or the permanent impairment allowance, or do you have this, or do you have that? And if you do, then we'll pay you the rest of the system. Now, to back up what I said, and again, I'm bouncing around about different topics, so maybe it'll make it more interesting, maybe I'll lose people. The president of the Service Income Support Insurance Plan, Mr. He stated, for one of these reports like I'm reading off, he stated that if a veteran comes to us 6 or 7 years after and he got PTSD, then when we approve him, retroactively, we'll pay him the entire amount. You know, he doesn't have to be released medically. You can get out and then apply to them, have them adjudicate your file, and then have them pay. But here's the kicker. Say you do that, because that's the case with Master Corporal Bloggins that I was telling you about. Served 77, 2004, he never got CISM. Now, if he applies late, and I do up a letter for him, and I amend the form letter I did up years ago, and I say you should get your Service Income Support Insurance Plan, then Veterans Affairs will claw it back. Okay? That's what the problem is with Denis Ouellette, Captain Retired Denis Ouellette. He had a payment from the Service Income Support Insurance Plan because they paid him late after the lawsuit, and then he was getting the earnings loss benefit, so then they decided that he was overpaid. And then they sent him a bill for $137,000. Now, in the case of Master Corporal Bloggins, I do up a form letter, he sends it to CISIP, CISIP approves him, and then Veterans Affairs says, well, you owe us now. Like, that's not fair. You can't try to compare apples and oranges. The Service Income Support Insurance Plan is payable based on the fact that you bought it, you paid premiums for it. The earnings loss benefit, I'm using the old term, I know, but the income replacement benefit / earnings loss benefit, it has service as its contribution, its premium. So instead of having, like, actual cash money being taken off your pay for the income replacement benefit, soldiers have service to be taken into account, plus the condition that you had to be injured in your service. All the payments that come through Veterans Affairs, you had to be injured on duty. So the fact of the matter is, you have two things that make it, critical that you had to get this stuff, and you had to get both at the same time. One is a thing called the Bradburn rule, where it said that if you pay for insurance, you're supposed to get it. If you get compensated from somebody else to make you whole, and you also have a contract of insurance, then you get your contract of insurance in addition to your indemnity to make you whole, because if you don't, you haven't been made whole, right? How can they look at you and say they made you whole? They put you back in a place that you were before they hurt you. If they take something into account that you owned, like insurance or pensions, it's just crazy. It's just nuts. I don't understand how they get away with this. It has been the common law since 1875. That was that Bradburn case, 1875. But I came up with it. Happens is these people who have to make the payments want to save money. They want to make more money. It's greed. And I'll link that back to that report there that I was talking about, where they said that nobody's looking after the veteran. Ordinarily, you're supposed to look after your own best interest. I've read that in Supreme Court of Canada cases talking about people who are entering into a contract. If you enter into a contract with someone, you're supposed to, sit down and try to look after yourself first, right? You're not supposed to look after other people first. It's not like you're a fiduciary. A fiduciary has to look after other people first. I'll give you some examples. A doctor-patient. The doctor is a fiduciary because of the professional knowledge that he has that you don't have as a patient. A parent-child. Okay? So a child doesn't have the wherewithal to keep itself alive. So a parent owes a fiduciary duty to the child. Now, so when the government takes money off your check for the Canadian Forces or the Canada Pension Plan or the EI stuff, they have a fiduciary duty to look after your best interest. They're not supposed to look after their own interests first. They're breaching the fiduciary duty when they do so. on that note, seeing I'm talking about the Auditor General in a 2014, 15, or 16 report, I can't remember exactly which year. I got it in my files if I really want to look it up and be exact. They said pensions are ordinarily of a fiduciary nature, but because the government owes a duty to the taxpayer, then the federal public pensions, like the Canadian private pensions, like the Canadian Forces, the RCMP, and the public service, Canadian Forces and RCMP public service pensions, they cannot be fiduciary. See, he had it backwards. I tried to call up the Auditor General's office and try to explain to them they shouldn't put out shit like that, because when you have somebody else's money and you have to look after it, you cannot say you're not a fiduciary. The government does not owe anybody in the public, like the taxpayers, any duty under the Canadian Forces Superannuation Act. And let me tell you why. Because the Canadian Forces Superannuation Act is what you call a registered pension plan under Income Tax Act Regulation Section 8500. It is supposed to be for the sole benefit of the pensioner, and it states that quite specifically in that act. So the government is trying to mislead us. The government is trying to gaslight us. This morning I posted a little pat in the back / whatever, but I mean, I can't hardly hear myself, but a veteran by the name of Jamie McWhorter, an Afghanistan war veteran who started a group called Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder Buddies, PTSD Buddies. He videoed the very Pension for Life dog and pony show that I was at. Now, I didn't have the wherewithal. I didn't think about taping myself beforehand. But I'm glad he did, because I found a copy of it on YouTube. So this morning I posted a bit about it. And it kind of triggered me, because god damn it, these people get up there, and the General Natinchuk got up there and said, we're going to smash together 6 different benefits. You can't smash together 6 different benefits when they're not the same. What kind of garbage is that? You have the Disability Award, which is basically the Pain and Suffering Award, they say, which they broke apart in 2006. And they brought in the new Veterans Charter. They decided that they would smash apart. They would separate the benefits. And now in 2019, they tried to tell us that they wanted to smash them together. Go fuck yourself there, General. Never thought to tell you at the time, but I mean, we were in public. The earnings loss benefit, that's supposed to be the economic loss payment. You can't combine that with they said before they want to separate it from the non-economic payment. And then the career impact allowance and the career impact allowance supplement, well, they got rid of the career impact allowance supplement. So they didn't smash it together at all. They deleted it. That's what the Parliamentary Budget Office said in its 2019 February report. It said that the injured veteran would lose $300,000 over their lifetime because of the repeal of the career impact allowance supplement. Now, I think that makes that political. In 2011, the Conservative government brought in Bill C-55, which added a $1,000 a month permanent impairment allowance supplement for the people that were getting the permanent impairment allowance. Now, think about that. That was double the base rate. You had 3 grades for that alleged benefit. You had grade, I don't know if it was going up or down. But the first one, the lowest one, was $500 a month. The second one was $1,000 a month, and the third one was $1,500 a month, which is a fine dollar. But then they didn't give it to anybody. Now, when they put that out in the Canada Gazette in 2006, they said that even after taxes, the amount of money that you get under the permanent impairment allowance is more than the exceptional incapacity allowance, which clearly shows that they thought that the both were of the same quality. But the exceptional incapacity allowance was tax-free under the Pension Act, and it was payable for pain and suffering. The permanent impairment allowance, they said, was economic, so they taxed it. But then they changed their mind, and they called it the career impact allowance, then they called it the additional pain and suffering compensation, and when they made all those complex name changes, they took away the tax version. But not being satisfied with that, the fuckers caused it to go back to the $500, $1,000, and $1,500, which basically put everybody back at square one. If you were a veteran in 2006 getting a permanent impairment allowance and it was $500 a month, you would have got inflation in 2006, inflation in 2007, inflation in 2008. Until 2019, it would have been much higher than in 2006, I mean. But Veterans Affairs decided when they went and took away the amount, they reversed the rates. They reversed time. You can't reverse time like that, them sons of bitches. How idiotic is that? Now, seeing I'm all wound up and triggered here, I mean, I'm getting a bit upset here. I tries to usually be all boring and monotone. But I was the one behind, I think. I made a mistake, okay? I admit it. I usually don't make very many mistakes. That's part of the obsessive compulsive personality thing. You want to have everything perfect. You try not to make mistakes. You hate mistakes. So I was reading about PFL, the pension for life, and I stopped reading at point 3 where it said that it appeared to me that men would get more than women. So I freaked out. I got in the car, went over to the minister's office, because Minister O'Regan at the time, he is my member apparently, he is the Minister of Veterans Affairs. So I explained to his staff, in no way, shape, or form can you have a benefit that men get more money than women. No, not in this day and age. You should not be so misogynistic, if I got that word right. I didn't even know what it meant until my son and them in school or something told me. Anyway, it's not very nice. Now what happened is that I didn't read on. And what it was is the women were going to get more than the men, which is just as bad. But when at that Dog and Pony show, when the minister was talking about the new pension for life, he said there's been a rumor going around the internet that, men are going to get more than women. And I poked at Sean Corrine, leading seaman, retired Sean Corrine. I went there with him. Me and him were meeting that day about taxes on class action damages. So I said, look at that, Sean. That's me. And then the minister went on to say, women are going to get more than men. And I said, oh my fuck. He doesn't understand that the government can't pick sides. The government can't pick men or women. It was bad enough when I thought it was men. Yes, I was wrong. But now you put it on the other foot. And you're saying that women are going to get more. For fuck's sakes. What's wrong with them people? Pay people the same amount. You want a legal definition of why? Law, Supreme Court of Canada, 1998. They had an EI where women were getting paid more if you're a single parent than a man. So the Supreme Court of Canada judges said we can fix this in 2 ways. We can take it from her, then they're both equal. Or we can give it to him, and then they're both equal. If we take it from her, we're performing equality with a justice, with a vengeance. So they gave it to him, obviously. So in the case where you have a higher payment going to a woman who is injured in service than a man, then you say, listen, we're going to give it to both. That's it. You can't say, oh, well, women live longer, and the way we base this is that we estimate that they would live this many years and the fellow would live that many years. No. Stop right there. Stop right there. You cannot justify discrimination based on sex, based on that dubious science called actuarial science. You cannot. You can't do it. Now, I explained that to many, many people, including the minister's office, and they were looking at me like I had 10 heads. They looked at me and said, why not? Why not? Because it's fucking discriminatory. Why did the government write Charter Section 15.1 where it says you cannot pick on people because of their age, their race, their gender, and their disability and stuff? Those are called minority rights. You're supposed to have rights that protect you against people who have more voting power than you because they have more people. So the government was nice enough to put into the Charter of Rights and Freedoms protections for us. So if you want a reason why you can't do what they did, well, the Charter tells us why. Common sense ought to too. Now, look how far off, straight off topic. Maybe it makes it a bit more interesting. Maybe it makes more hard to follow. But let me look down through that report and see if anything else catches my eye, and then I'll try to call her quits soon, I suppose. If anybody keeps liking these, I was thinking about giving these up because it's wearing me out. Like after I finish these broadcasts, I start thinking about things, and then I think about something that I never thought about before, and then I said, holy shit, how did I miss that? And then I try to call somebody who could fix it, like the Chief of Defense Staff or the Canadian Forces people, and pension people. And I said to that lady at the Canadian Forces pension people, look, I don't expect you to fix this. You don't have a magic wand, but make a note that somebody called in. You don't even have to name me, but make a note that the caller seemed to know what he was talking about. Can somebody please look into these inquiries, these issues? And one of these days it will get fixed. That's my attitude with the government, you see. Worked for CRA from it was really with Indian Foreign Affairs first, teacher for 2 years. Then 2 years as a customs inspector with Canada Customs and Revenue Agency. And then I went to tax as a tax collector because they kept cutting my job. And there's a employment protection provision for federal government workers that soldiers don't get called workforce adjustment. So if a civilian gets cut in the government, they don't lose their job. They get offered another job. Okay? If a soldier gets cut from the military because they're disabled, they don't get offered another job. Now, I wrote a column or a story on that years ago. I called it, I can't remember, something about workforce. Anyway, I'll look it up later. But you think about that and tell me how fair that is. There's a duty to accommodate for disability. Now, the government, being a government, took its duty out of the military. It said it didn't apply to military members. I got news for them, though, if I'm right. The Charter of Rights and Freedoms supersedes the Canadian Human Rights Act. So they put into the Canadian Human Rights Act that it doesn't apply to the Canadian Forces for medical releases or whatever. But the thing is, they can't do that. You can only write laws that are in compliance with the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. I'm not a lawyer, but I know that. I know that because they stated it in reports that I've read. I've read it myself. I don't need someone to tell me about it. I've read it. Anyway, let me go back to one or two more things before I call it quits. But at least one of the reasons I'm doing this is that there will be a documentary record that will be on file, as long as somebody don't take it off or whatever. When I finish, there's still the video there. Now, in the past, I used to do videos on my phone and just upload them. 2 to 3, 4 minutes is what it was. Now, here I am talking, I bet you, 40 minutes now, 45 minutes. But those videos, I tried to make as concise as possible. Check them out. Look at the old videos in my videos and audio group. I listed some of them until I got tired of it because I put out so much stuff. I have satellite groups about observation post petitions, observation post tax savings ideas, observation post itself, observation post pension act issues, observation post Royal Commission on Veterans Affairs. That, to me, is the answer to all our problems. If it was done right, and I don't know if they'll ever do it because they don't have the political will, I believe, I think we need to be able to put people on the stand, and my understanding is you can ask someone a direct question like, did you steal the money in a commission or something, a board of inquiry, and because they have immunity from prosecution, you can get to the truth. That's my understanding of that power. So I believe that's what we need, right? That we need somebody that won't be afraid of going to jail, because ordinarily, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, seeing I was talking about it, it has a provision that says you can't be asked to implicate yourself. See? So you can't be forced to rat out yourself, according to the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. If someone wants to put you in jail for doing something, they had to prove to a jury or to a judge, if it's just a judge alone, they had to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that you committed that crime. But if you did a board of inquiry or a Royal Commission or something into this mess, the people that are offering evidence to try to get something fixed, my understanding is they can't face criminal prosecution, unless they lie, of course. If they lie then, they're in trouble for lying then. But if they tell the truth in the inquiry, it's okay. Back to this, if I can get it done, and then I'll call her quits. I appreciate the people that are watching. I see that there are more people watching. Maybe I'll start getting some momentum. Because I'm not asking for things because of asking things, whatever. I mean, people might look at me and say, you want the Canadian Forces Superannuation Act Section 15.2b and the bridging thing gone because you're sympathetic towards soldiers and veterans. No, that's not it at all. I don't like to see sons of bitches who don't have a goddamn clue decide to save money on the backs of the soldier who is healthy enough to go to war. You could order him to war, but they got, goddamn it, I better watch or I'll lose my voice because I'll get caught up in this. But when they become disabled, you'll save money by inserting a law because you had the power because you were elected. Yeah, I got a problem with that. Put them out against the wall, give them a blindfold, shoot the fuckers is my idea. Because you're harming our national security. We need soldiers in times of peril. This is getting me. Let me go back to my report. So, I don't know if Major Henwood did this statement in paragraph 1A of the report, But he talked about the service income support insurance plan. He said the service income, or somebody did it and it was put under his name. The service income support insurance plan administers a long-term disability insurance plan that provides income replacement benefit. Sound familiar? The name of the new ELB is income replacement benefit. And here they are talking about it in 2002 in the Senate. Whether a member is injured on duty or not. Well, not anymore. Because of financial pressure, the service income support insurance plan is now payable only for a non-duty injury. My audience, that probably wouldn't affect because you're probably a veteran on out of service. But think about this. During your service, had you suffered a car accident, you would have got your insurance. Had you been injured on duty, you would have got your insurance. That's the way insurance is supposed to work. You pay your premium. If the risk happens, you get it. Now, the government are trying to bamboozle us into thinking that, well, you know, it was originally set up in 1969 as a complement to the Pension Act. And you couldn't get a Pension Act pension for off-duty injuries, so we needed to bring in some kind of income protection for soldiers. And that sounds reasonable, except for the fact that they ought to have made it for duty and non-duty in 1969, because that's just how insurance works. So in 1969, they shouldn't have came up with that, and I don't even know if that's just people trying to put spin on it later. I've never seen documents about the creation of CISIP. Now, I did come across a really interesting 1974 case, Nova Scotia Supreme Court, about a pastor. And that gave me some information about it. But basically, insurance is supposed to give you protection. Okay, income replacement, garbage. Look, people get insured, not things, like income. So you buy insurance, you don't insure things. So if you have a boat and you buy insurance on it, it's your property, but it isn't insured first if something happens to the boat, okay, or a car. That's something that people don't seem to understand. And if you want to look into it and see what I'm talking about, you'll get a very nice summary of the way insurance works in the Glynn versus Scottish Union, Ontario Court of Appeal 1963 case. Jeez, I could be a lawyer, I believe. I actually, a little aside, a little bit of a funny thing. A couple of years ago, there was a soldier, a veteran, who got out, and he developed a bunch of different patents. Then the government took his patents. Now, I got involved in that because I don't like to see the government stealing intellectual property from people. So I ended up talking to him, getting the story, and then I ended up doing a lot of reports on my observation post thing. And the next thing, this professor from Western University calls me up and says, listen, can I interview you on this? I go right ahead. I don't care. The thing is, the professor asked me to do an interview so I could try to get all this stuff fixed. But the gist of his story was, Brown his name was, I think, he came up with an invention field that might be called our RCBN, or they keep changing the acronyms on the name, but I'll use the old one, NBC. So he came up with some invention that was worth a lot of money, and then the government said because he was on the supplementary reserve list, not a primary reserve list, he was on the supplementary reserve list, so they took away the right to him to have that intellectual property. They took his patent away. That's crazy, okay? Insane. He signed up for the sup-res list. As far as I know, you put your name on that, you're healthy enough to get out. If you're disabled, you wouldn't be able to be on it. And in case the aliens landed or zombies came up or there was a war, you are trained and then you can be recalled to the military and you can help out the country. And they abused him by bringing up the Public Service Patent Act or something like that. And they brought that in and tried to say that he was the same as a public servant because he was on the sup-reserve list. I hope my listener, my watchers, are as aghast at that abuse of law as I am. It's disgusting, okay? You can't take away people's real or intellectual property just because you want to. You understand? Like, you can't just take something because you got the power to do it. Right? I mean, the guy even had cancer at the time. I was trying to help him out, and it was hard to get a hold of him and hard to do things because he was fighting cancer. And the government was doing all this to him. What the fuck is wrong with them people? Anyway. Mr. LeMay, according to Mr. Pierre LeMay, president of CISIP, CISIP was created in 1969 to provide protection for military personnel for non-duty related injuries as a complement to their service coverage for service-related injuries under the Pension Act. So he said the truth in a way, because the Pension Act is insurance, okay? The Pension Act is insurance like workers' compensation is insurance. So you gave up the right to sue, and I could have put this in some other piece, and I might have mentioned it in the article in the piece I did on the Pension Act. If you are watching this and you get the pension, do not let anybody convince you that you didn't pay for your pension. You paid for it twice. Once because you gave up the right to sue. In Crown Liability and Proceedings Act, Section 9, it states that the person who gets injured in service and gets a pension to compensate them for their disability cannot sue the government in tort to the same thing. So, you gave up the right to sue. That has value. But only if you get hurt. See? Everybody in Canada is born with the right to sue someone if they get hurt by that person. But because the government took away the right to sue, it has to compensate you for it. So the other thing I would mention is the moral and legal and ethical obligation that was mentioned in the War Amputation of Canada, Ontario Court of Appeal, 1997 case. And they said in exchange for service to the country agrees in an implied contract to pay salary, allowances, and a pension. So pay is automatic, okay? You can't expect people, we're not slaves, you can't expect us to serve without pay. That's automatic. Allowances, that's pretty automatic too, because god damn it, if you have some allowance for serving in a submarine or being a paratrooper or being out in the field, if you're in these days, it's called field duty allowance. It used to be called field training allowance or something. Anyway, you have to pay people if they suffer hardships over and above. They have different environmental allowances and they have other allowances. I forget. I researched it at one point, but it's not coming to me right now. But the pension was only a contingent right. You serve your entire career, you escape, you go on tours, nothing happens. You don't get hurt. You had the right to a pension, but you never got hurt, you never got injured in service, so you didn't have to exercise your right. See? So that's the nature of insurance. So you gave up the right to sue, and you served, and you took the risk of getting hurt in service, which is why I was referring to the war. Because it's only natural that if you protect the country, they have to protect you. So I came up with this theory, and it's based on the unlimited liability. I might get digressed, but they say reservists don't face it, but I disagree. If you're a soldier, you can be recalled, or if there was something happen, you can be told, here's your gun, go do your duty. So don't go giving me that shit about regular force people got less choice. You're in the military, all soldiers have unlimited liability. If you don't want to face unlimited liability, you don't join the military. Now, if a soldier faces unlimited liability, then the government has to back him up based on unlimited liability. Now tell me that's not quid pro quo. Or in a deal, right? Does that make sense? Now, they would hate that, right? Because right now, they are limiting their liability in the bridging. Okay, so they don't want to pay out too much money, so they put in a clause in the Canadian Forces Superannuation Act, Section 15.2b, and they said they're going to reduce your amount of money that you get if you get the Canada Pension Plan. Now, so that's reducing their legal liability to pay. That's making them more money. Like the Peel case I mentioned before, at least I think I mentioned it, that talked about a negative benefit. Now you can have a positive benefit where you receive money, or you can have a negative benefit where you avoid paying. Now that's a very important concept, because they were discussing fiduciary duty and unjust enrichment. And they were saying that a person can be enriched by getting money they shouldn't have gotten. The example I always use whenever I'm talking to someone and I think they don't know about it, I said, you're at a bank machine. The bank machine, you don't have $1 million in the bank, but the bank machine spits out $1 million in $20 or $50 bills, and you didn't have the money in there. It's not your money. You owe the bank that, because it's ethically correct to repay someone for what you don't owe. It's called you were unjustly enriched. On the other hand, and my mind is kind of whirling around all over the place, You're walking down the road, or you're walking on a path, and you find $1 million with nobody's name on it. That's called a windfall. Now, a windfall is not the same as what I said about a bank spitting out money, because, I mean, the bank had the money being held there, and somebody left the money out there and you found it. So the reason I know about windfalls and stuff is because I was looking up for taxes. Every receipt of money that you get is not income. Let me give you a couple of examples, even though we're not discussing income. I'll bring it up because I was talking about windfalls. If you find money, it's a windfall, no tax. You win a lottery, that's gambling, that's not taxed. You get hurt by somebody else and you get paid damages, that's capital, repayment to make you whole, that's not taxed. Right? Services, you get welfare, you don't pay tax on that. You know why you don't pay tax? At least I would presume, I'm making a judgment on this. If the government charged taxes on welfare or income support, then it would have to increase the amount to take into account that the person wouldn't have money to buy things after the fact. And the fact of the matter is, welfare only pays enough for you to survive. So if the government wants to pay someone a certain amount so that they can pay the bills, the electricity, the utilities, they can pay for their rent or mortgage, and they can pay for things, just food, clothes on their back. They don't want to give you anything extra, but they also, if they add a tax to welfare, they'd be increasing their own expense. So they, quite rightly, don't do it. Now, the idiots at Finance Canada put in there in the tax expenditures report, if we made welfare taxable, we'd raise this much money. I mean, what's wrong with their heads? They don't have a clue sometimes. I tried to call them and try to get them to change stuff like that, but I don't think anybody reads them besides the government. Now, the problem with these reports, and again, I'm straying off topic a bit, a person could read those reports and they could see something like, if the disability award, we could raise $210 million in taxes. Well, you could if you had the power, but you don't have the jurisdiction. Property and civil rights are provincial. So you might want to tax the disability award, which is a lump sum payment of capital to replace whatever they say it is. I mean, they say it's pain and suffering, but I don't believe them. That doesn't make me a conspiracy theorist. I think they did a one-for-one substitution with the Pension Act for the disability award. The reason I say that is they use the table of disabilities for both. They require you to be injured in service for both. They give the VRAB appeal rights to both. So I base my theory, plus I've read it in cases and stuff. They said it in cases, that they replaced the Pension Act with the disability award. They didn't say they replaced it with a suite of benefits. They said they replaced it with the disability award. So who are you going to believe? They came up with new stuff and said that they have a suite of benefits. It was actually mentioned in the 2006 Canada Gazette, as I did the other day, but not what they did when they went to court. So I think a lot of this stuff is they're presenting certain cases to certain people, certain issues. They spin it a certain way to certain people, and then they spin it another way to other people. Like, again, everything is going around in my head. Excuse me for getting off track a bit, but they might say, we're investing this much money in veterans. Well, are you talking about the money before tax or after tax? Because you tax the benefits under the new Veterans Charter. So if the government gets back about 16% of what it pays in things like old age and CPP and whatever. The Pension Act, it didn't get that money back. So I think it is my opinion that they created the new Veterans Charter to get rid of the tax break, the payment that was being sent out. Without a T4, without a T4AP, without a T4A, T5007, without anything. So a Pension Act payment is being made to the veteran, and no compliance and enforcement measures are being taken as far as people like CRA is concerned. Because if you work, they ask for a T4 that they require duplicate, and then they require you to send your copy in, and then they require the employer to send their copy in, and then CRA has a matching program to see if you meddle with it. So if they don't match, then the matching people have to call, and they can't accuse you of being a crook. But they say, I'm calling about this, and there's a discrepancy on this. Your employer sent in this, you sent in that. Can you explain the discrepancy? At least that's my understanding. I didn't do it, that job. But the thing is, and I think I'll shut up after this point, Veterans Affairs has a matching program, okay? They have income verification on earnings loss benefit. Now, that has caused me a lot of angst, I called up the Privacy Commission and I said, excuse me, but is there a restriction on collecting too much information about people? Yeah? Section 4 of the Act. Okay, well, I think I have a problem that the government is collecting too much information. Veterans Affairs collects the information from the veteran in a form called an annual income verification form, but at the same time they get the information from Canada Revenue Agency, and then they compare it to what the veteran gave them in what's similar to me as a former tax collector at CRA as the matching program at CRA. So if you're only required to have the information once, you can make the case for, getting it from either the veteran or CRA. But if you collect it from both, you are collecting it twice, which is not the minimum as required by Section 4 of the Privacy Act, and then the federal government is breaking the law. And I got a problem with the federal government breaking the law. Fault my logic. I don't think my logic is faulted. I was going to shut this down, but I'll mention one other thing that proves I'm right. After I finish this, I will do what I did yesterday. I'll attach the evidence to the comments. And I found a Treasury Board Secretariat report about privacy, because they administer it. They try to enforce the Privacy Act to make sure too much information is not collected, because there's a cost to having too much information. It overloads the system. They said that one of the main reasons for Section 82A of the Privacy Act, which is an exception for the federal government, if the federal government has information on file that it could use with other similar programs, then it doesn't need to collect it again. And that's common sense. But the main reason it said, and I got to read between the lines for you here, I'll show you after, it said it wanted to reduce the informational burden, the response burden for the citizen. Now, what is a response burden? Well, CRA asks you for the information, Veterans Affairs asks you for the information. Well, you have a burden, a duty to answer both. Now, that's why they put Section 82A into the Privacy Act, to create an exception for themselves, to save money and have common sense. Last point, I swear. That's where this comes up, okay? You take the Service Income Support Insurance Plan and the October 2016 increase in benefits to 90%, and CISIP, the D&D insurance, didn't do it. Now, Veterans Affairs required all CISIP veterans, like everybody else, I guess, or maybe just them, to apply for the increase, which did not apply to someone in the Veterans Affairs program. So look at the response burden there. The person who's on CISIP alone and not getting anything through VAC has to apply for to get the extra 15%, but the person on the VAC program doesn't have to apply. So there is a very clear burden put on that disabled veteran. So it's against the charter, it's against common sense, it's against the common law. They shouldn't have done it. Look, what they should have done is looked at what they said in the 2015 Canada Gazette. They said by 2025 we expect CISIP to be gone, and we're bringing in the Retirement Income Security Benefit, and we set the 2025 date to give enough time for Veterans Affairs to bring people over from the D&D program. Now, isn't that news for you? At one point I asked Veterans Affairs if they would take me so I could say hell with D&D's CISIP program, and I asked to get brought over to the Veterans Affairs program, and they wouldn't touch it. You see, the problem is that these people want their empires. That's my overriding theory about all this stuff, is that the government has different departments. Each department has its own agenda. So the Veterans Affairs Department didn't want to take me because it was too simple. They wanted to have the work. They wanted to have all the applications and the control, the ability to say yes or no. But if it was automatic, like a medical release makes CISIP automatically payable to the veteran, that doesn't get them control, and that's something they don't like to give up, because it ends up not costing them money in the long run. Anyway, I think I've talked enough. That's an hour, and probably actually about an hour and 7, because I started about 5 too, because I get antsy when I get close to being time for me to start this. So then I said, shag it, 5 minutes early, who cares? Because, they can pick up, they can rewind, it's all there. And the main reason I'm doing this is try to get it interest. Look up that Senate Committee on National Defense and Veterans Affairs report in 2002. Have a look at the fact that, the government is always looking for ways to save money on our backs, and I view that as treasonous. You want to have people trust you. You want to send people into combat and have them trust you, that you're not going to just expend them uselessly. Don't treat them the way you're treating us.